Hey everybody, Anchorman here, and I am here on a mission from a higher power to bring you, the average gamer, some extremely important information. I am operating on behalf of a new studio who is compiled of some of the best minds in the industry, and I'm not just talking about indie devs here, but guys who have worked with the big dogs, like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo, Rockstar, Ubisoft, all the greats. They will be debuting their first small IP at E3 this year and are working on a few AAA titles to be released in the next year or so, but due to NDAs, no specifics can be given, so no begging me for answers or any kind of crap. So, on to the message for today. Resolution is not the same as graphics, and graphics are not the same as aesthetics. They are all very different things, and for some reason for the past few years, everyone, including professional game reviewers, and even some developers, confuse all three as being the same. Game reviewers tend to be the worst offenders at confusing these. They will talk about a game's graphics when in reality they are discussing the game's aesthetics. Screen resolution is of very little importance to developers. In fact, it isn't even brought up in discussion until the very final stage of production. When you start in the game industry or when you begin school for game design, you are told one of the biggest mistakes you can make with your game is to confuse graphics with aesthetics, and yet so many seem to forget this lesson. Let's talk about resolution for a minute. When working in the game industry, you will hear the term resolution for two things. One is screen resolution, which is of very little importance to developers, and resolution is very seldom used for this purpose. The other is model resolution. That is what resolution is used most frequently for in a game studio. Model resolution refers to the amount of polygons, tries, or faces that a model has. The first example is a bare bone female model. It doesn't even have basic textures yet. This female model has 21,098 polygons or faces making up the model. But now we are presented with a little bit of a dilemma here. We could increase the model resolution and make it appear smoother and more organic, but doing so taxes the hardware and game engines more. Or we can decrease the amount of faces, which will make the edges appear more jagged and mechanical, but doing this will increase hardware and game engine performance, leaving more assets available to render other objects in the game or increase frame rate or screen resolution. Now, let's talk about the difference between model resolution and screen resolution. Here is an example of a sphere rendered at 720p and 1080p. Can you guess which image was rendered at 1080p? The 1080p image is the first one. The 720p image has the higher resolution model. The 720p sphere has 100 divisions, and the 1080p sphere has only 24. The render time for the 720p 100 division sphere took 0.000 seconds to render. When I rendered it in 1080p with 100 divisions, it took 0.0002 seconds to render, which is twice as long as the 720p. Since I wanted them to render at the same speed, I had to decrease the amount of faces on the sphere in the 1080p image. This is the best effect that the resolution gate has had on our games. It is nothing for a gaming PC to render at 1080p for any game, but our consoles are far from that quality. In order for a full game on consoles to be rendered at 1080p, sacrifices have to be made somewhere in the game in order to free up resources. These sacrifices may come at a lower poly count on models, or seemingly unimportant features in the environment being deleted. Some studios have even abandoned some game mechanics in order to free up resources in order to release a 1080p game on both of the new consoles. You are sacrificing elements of the game for your precious 1080p. And on to the final and most important part of game design, aesthetics. Graphics serve aesthetics. I can't stress this enough. First of all, graphics are simply the hardware and software rendering techniques that allow us to display images in a particular way on screen. Graphics are like self-shadowing, normal mapping, subsurface scattering, tessellation, and bloom lighting. Higher graphic capabilities allow you to display more polygons, better lighting and shadows, textures and surfaces, and the details on your models. Graphics are great, but they serve the visual side of aesthetics. If you put graphics on a pedestal higher than aesthetics, you get a game that looks like Golden Axe Beast Rider. Beast Rider tried to show graphical superiority at the time, and what they created was a high poly count game where the bland and almost non-existent aesthetics clashed with the gameplay. The aesthetics in that game actually muted out the action, making it boring. Aesthetics are what brings a player into the game world that you present to them. Aesthetics cover everything from sound effects and mechanics to the music. Aesthetics encompass the whole game experience. Let's compare the Medal of Honor Warfighter game in 2012 with Borderlands 2. Medal of Honor's game engine, when combined with last-gen hardware, had over 10 times the graphical capabilities of Borderlands 2's game engine with last-gen hardware. Yet, Medal of Honor's aesthetics fell completely flat, and Borderlands' aesthetics became a huge selling point. Borderlands was bright and colorful and different from what was on the market at the time, and yet so many gamers just fell in love with it. Medal of Honor, on the other hand, was very bland, and everything from very muted colors to the characters and the mechanics. Now, I'm not saying that something without bright colors fails in the aesthetics, though. Look at Fallout 3. Everything was pretty muted color-wise for the most part, yet though the character designs, gameplay, mechanics, environmental sounds, and voice acting, and the great aesthetics were achieved. A great amount of effort went into the design of everything in Fallout 3, with the sole goal of making the player more immersed into the world that was presented before them on the screen. Also remember, aesthetics are holistic. When one part of the game aesthetics fail, the whole aesthetic system fails. We all have had that one game experience where you're playing in a fantasy world, and the next thing you know, you're talking to a townsperson who looks like a 90s beach bum, who would be better off holding a surfboard than a sword. Things like that break a game's immersion, and is due to poor aesthetic planning. And this message is straight from the horse's mouth, guys. This is straight from an actual developer's mouth. Not an insider, not me, not anybody else. Sadly, with gamers screaming 1080p or nothing to game designers, we are losing touch with aesthetics. We are placing something that used to be considered last in the development process, screen resolution, now at the front of the development process, and creating everything else around it, resulting in games that are sacrificing poly counts, textures, frame rate, and even mechanics and extra content. Aesthetics so far this new generation has brought us Rises and Infamous Second Sons, great stories and visuals, and Titanfall FPS mechanics. If gamers don't calm down on screaming, "We want 1080p" on their consoles, aesthetics will have to take a backseat to raw processing power on the hardware and software sides, and games that truly immerse the players will become scarcer. If that happens, I guess I won't be able to say graphics serve aesthetics anymore, and if you ask my employees, I tend to say that a lot during pre-production and production. Don't get me wrong, 1080p screen resolution can be a great thing, but it should never be the driving force to game creation. It needs to stay where it was at. After everything is said and done with the game, the developing team will sit down and determine the highest resolution the game can support without sacrificing anything they created over the past couple of years. That is where the game resolution discussion needs to stay if you want more games like Infamous Second Son and Titanfall this generation. There are many issues going on in the gaming industry today that affect the publishers, designers, and most of all, the gamers. If we don't stop focusing on screen resolution and on the issues that actually impact your games, we will be in a very sad state as an industry. I want to give a big thank you to all the guys at Debonair for providing me with all this information that I could give to the general public, and hopefully everyone who watches this video will finally learn the difference between graphics and aesthetics, and this resolution gate stuff will finally end. Anyway, guys, this is Anchorman signing out, and I hope you guys have a great day.